My husband, Mike, is holding a baby around 1 year old, a child I've never seen before. It was a sight that made me doubt my own eyes.
Daddy,
The baby called out to Mike innocently. With trembling hands, I made a phone call. Mike, where are you right now?
What? Didn't you listen this morning? I told you I'm on a business trip. Don't call me again.
Mike abruptly hung up, but I watched from the shadows as he smiled warmly at the baby again. This was the same man who rarely ever helped with drop-offs or picks for our own 3-year-old son. And yet, here he was, letting someone else's baby call him Daddy and pretending to be on a business trip to pick her up. It's a cruel betrayal. Mike has ignored our family and left everything to me, his wife. A man like that is no longer necessary in my life. I turned on my heels, igniting a fire within myself for what was to come. Just you wait, Mike, I'm going to expose every one of your misdeeds. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my husband, Mike, and our 3-year-old son, Ryan. I've been working full-time at the same company ever since I graduated from college, though now I'm on reduced hours. This morning, as usual, I was rushing around to get Ryan to daycare. Ryan, hurry up and finish your breakfast. Once I'm done hanging up the laundry, we're leaving.
okay.
Encouraging Ryan, who was slowly eating his breakfast, I checked to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything and then hurried to the front door. I put Ryan's helmet on and secured him on the back seat of my bike before getting myself ready. As I got on the bike, I cheerfully called out to motivate us both. Here we go, Ryan. Let's roll.
Let's go.
Another day of the same routine. Heading to work via daycare in the morning and returning home in reverse order in the evening. Once I get back, my day doesn't slow down until it's time for bed. In this hectic life of mine, Mike's presence is barely noticeable. Mike leaves early in the morning and comes home late at night. He works long hours, often with overtime and even weekend shifts. I don't even have the time to wonder how many days it has been since Ryan and Mike last spent meaningful time together, as my days are consumed with parenting, housework, and work. I originally met Mike through work. Our relationship started because he approached me first. I was drawn to his work ethic and dedication to his job. Mike understood my desire to continue working.
I think women who work are amazing. You don't need to quit your job even after we get married. I love seeing you shine at work, Emily.
Thank you, Mike. When he proposed to me, I happily accepted. We got married when I was 28 and Mike was 30. Both my parents, who live far away, were delighted about our marriage. Mike's mother had already passed away, and his father, Paul, lived alone in their family home, which was near the rental apartment where we live. Paul was still working and didn't interact with us much. A year after we got married, we had a child. A very adorable boy whom we named Ryan. Parenting for the first time turned out to be much harder than I had imagined, and I was exhausted every day. Mike's work became increasingly demanding, leaving him no time to help with childcare, so I ended up handling almost everything on my own. Hi, Mike. You must be tired.
What? You're still up. You should put the baby to bed early.
I try, but he keeps crying. I've been holding him like this to calm him down, but it's not easy. Ryan's cries echoed through the apartment. Mike glanced at him briefly and let out a sigh.
Just get him to stop crying already. His voice is echoing into the hallway. This is an apartment building, you know. It's disturbing the neighbors.
I know. I'm sorry.
If you know, then quiet him down already. I'm tired from work, and coming home to Ryan's crying just gives me a headache.
Mike was unhelpful when it came to parenting. On top of that, he would get irritated whenever Ryan cried. With no energy left to argue, I would take Ryan out for a walk whenever his crying got worse at night. The cool night breeze seemed to calm Ryan, making him a bit more content. It was exhausting, but looking at his sleeping face always melted my heart. I wish I could share this precious moment with Mike. Just then, I heard a voice from ahead.
Oh, is that you, Emily?
Paul. Looking at the person walking toward me, I realized it was Paul. He was in a suit, clearly on his way home from work. Even though he was nearing 60, Paul still held a senior position and worked with remarkable vigor, appearing much younger than his age. You've been working late again. You must be tired.
Yeah. But what about you, Emily? Why are you out at this hour?
Ryan wouldn't stop crying, so I took him out for a walk to help him settle down.
That must have been tough.
Paul leaned in to look at Ryan in my arms. Ryan was sound asleep, his lips slightly parted, breathing softly.
What a sweet face. He looks so peaceful in your arms, Emily.
Oh no, I'm not. At that time, I had been repeatedly criticized by Mike, who would say things like, "Stop making Ryan cry," or "How can you call yourself a mother when he's always crying?" Hearing Paul's unexpected kind words made my eyes well up with tears.
What's wrong, Emily? Are you all right?
Sorry, it's nothing. Just something in my eye. I ended up covering it up with a clumsy lie, but Paul didn't press me any further. He might have seen through it, but he chose to let it slide. Paul then spoke to me kindly.
I'm still working, but if you ever need help, I'll be there. Even if it's just this old guy, you can always count on me.
No, Paul, you're already so busy. But thank you so much. Paul's kindness was a lifeline for me. He continued to comment on how adorable Ryan was, filling my heart with warmth. If Mike was raised by someone like Paul, I'm sure he'll come around. He's just too busy with work to have the bandwidth right now. With that thought, I resolved to take on the year of child rearing leading up to my return to work, handling nearly everything on my own. When Ryan turned 1, I started taking him to a nearby daycare and returned to work. Back at my old job, I thanked my colleagues for their support during my maternity leave. I was especially grateful to my coworker Ashley, who started at the same time as I did and had taken on my workload. Sorry for putting extra work on you. Was everything okay while I was gone?
It was fine. You helped me out when I was on maternity leave too, so we're even. And really, you didn't need to get me a gift. But thank you for the beautiful handkerchief.
No, I wanted to. It was fun picking it out at the department store after so long. Thanks again, and I'll be counting on you. After spending an entire year with just Ryan, I was thrilled to talk to adults at work again. I felt nervous returning to work after such a long time, but I quickly regained my rhythm and fit back in seamlessly. I fully returned to my busy, full throttle days of working at the office. The days flew by, and Ryan turned 3. Today, as usual, I'd need to rush out before 4 p.m. to pick him up from daycare. I'll be leaving now. Have a good evening.
I need to head out soon to pick up my kids too.
Ashley, who has 2 children, also works reduced hours like me. With her youngest now 6, things have gotten much easier for her, and she's become a reliable mentor mom. My other coworkers are also understanding, and I feel fortunate to work in such a supportive environment. However, the gap between Mike and me hasn't closed. Mike remains as uninvolved in parenting as ever. Lately, Mike has been going on more overnight business trips. It's become common for him to be away from home half the week, making his presence as a father even more negligible. On top of that, even when Mike is home, he doesn't speak to Ryan at all.
Daddy, look at this. I drew it myself.
Even when Ryan tried to show him his drawing, Mike brushed him off.
Later, Daddy's taking a break right now.
Yet, all he did was lie on the couch scrolling through his phone. I don't know if it's work or personal, but since he rarely spends time with Ryan, he could at least look at him and praise him now and then. When Ryan went off for his nap, looking dejected, I took the chance to call Mike out. Hey, that was a bit much. Ryan was just trying to talk to you.
I can't help it. I'm tired.
Mike replied, immediately making excuses to avoid engaging with Ryan. But those excuses weren't cutting it anymore. Even after you rest, do you ever play with Ryan? You're always glued to your phone and never pay attention to him. Don't you realize he's your son?
What did you just say? Emily, since when did you start talking to me like that?
Talking like that, I'm just pointing out what needs to be said as a family. I was simply saying what needed to be said as his wife. However, Mike seemed to find it infuriating and stood up with an angry expression.
Now I'm in a bad mood. There's no way I can play with Ryan feeling like this. I was planning to spend time with him later, but forget it now. And you can blame yourself for it. Ryan can't play with me because of your unnecessary remarks. I'm going out to kill some time.
Wait, what? Ignoring my attempts to stop him, Mike stormed out of the house. On what was supposed to be a rare day off, he chose to act on his own. Once again, Ryan and I were left behind in this house.
Where's Daddy?
Ryan woke up from his nap and started looking for Mike. He went out for a bit.
What? I wanted to go too.
Ryan, who had been looking forward to spending time with his dad, started crying. I'm sorry, Ryan. Hey, why don't we play together instead? What do you want to do? Drawing? Building blocks? Or maybe we can bake some cookies? Desperately trying to comfort him, I was probably on the verge of tears myself.
Blocks.
All right, let's make something so amazing that Daddy will be surprised when he gets home.
Okay. I'll make a train.
Ryan's determination made my heart ache with love. But Mike didn't return until after Ryan had already gone to bed. I didn't know where he had been, but he didn't even touch the dinner I had prepared. Ryan made that for you. He said he wanted to show it to you. In the corner of the room was a colorful train made of blocks.
Yeah, I saw it. Just put it away. It's in the way.
However, Mike glanced at it briefly, said that, and then headed to the bathroom. What a terrible thing to say. For the first time, I felt a wave of intense anger. The word divorce flashed through my mind. Do we really need such a cold, unfeeling father in our lives? One day at work, Ashley approached me. She looked serious and said she needed to talk about something. Worried that she might be dealing with a personal issue, I joined her in an empty meeting room during our break. But the topic turned out to be about me.
This is Mike, isn't it?
What? On Ashley's phone was a picture of a couple. The woman was holding a baby who looked about a year old, and standing next to her was a man. That man was unmistakably Mike. Mike?
Are you sure?
Yes, that's definitely Mike. I confirmed, and Ashley let out a sigh before explaining further.
That woman's name is Sarah. Her baby joined the daycare my youngest attends earlier this year. We sometimes ran into each other during pickup times, but recently, a man started picking the baby up instead. He looks so much like Mike that it shocked me.
Ashley had attended our wedding, so she obviously knew Mike's face. Mike, on the other hand, probably wouldn't remember her or any of my friends individually. But why would Mike be picking up another baby? My mind was spinning.
I didn't approach them, just in case it was a coincidence. But Emily, does Mike have any relatives with a baby?
He shouldn't. He's an only child, and his cousins live far away.
I see. Well, one time, the two of them came to pick the baby up together, so I took a picture just to be sure. It's really him, isn't it?
I stared at the photo in disbelief. The suit and tie were unmistakably familiar. Even the tie pin was the one I had given him for his birthday. What on earth is going on here? Ashley mentioned that Sarah is a single mother. The thought of what kind of relationship Mike might have with her and who this baby could possibly be sent chills down my spine. Could it be an illegitimate child? Feeling faint, I nearly collapsed, but Ashley caught me in time. No, I can't afford to lose it now. Determined to uncover the truth, I hired a private investigator and initiated an investigation. A month later, I left work early and went to a certain location to confirm the truth with my own eyes. It was the daycare where Mike had reportedly appeared, the same one Ashley's child attended. It was far from our house, so it hadn't been a contender for Ryan's daycare. From a concealed spot where I could see the daycare gates, I began to watch carefully. After a while, Mike appeared. Even though he had left home in a suit earlier, Mike showed up at the daycare casually dressed, walking on foot. He confidently picked up a baby from the daycare as if it were routine. The baby, dressed in pink floral patterned clothes, was likely a girl.
Daddy,
The child called out to Mike innocently. With trembling hands, I called Mike on the phone. It was my final step to confirm his identity. The man I was watching pulled his phone out of his pocket and answered. When I heard Mike's voice on the line, my suspicions were confirmed. Mike, where are you right now?
What? Didn't you listen this morning? I told you I'm on a business trip. Don't call me again.
It was true. Mike had left early that morning with a large suitcase, claiming he was going on a business trip. The casual clothes he was wearing now must have been packed in that suitcase. I have no idea where the rest of his luggage is. I watched from the shadows as Mike, after abruptly hanging up on me, smiled warmly at the baby once again. Despite never once picking up or dropping off Ryan, he let another baby call him Daddy and disguised himself with a business trip to pick her up. It is a cruel betrayal. After neglecting our family for so long and pushing all the responsibilities onto me, his wife, it is clear. I don't need him anymore. I turned on my heels. With enough evidence and conviction, I decided to go pick up Ryan from daycare. My mind was consumed with the thought of divorcing Mike. But after all the pain I had endured, I felt the need to fight back somehow. That's when I came up with an idea and made a call. Paul, this is Emily. I'm sorry to bother you.
Emily, what's the matter?
Despite being at work, Paul answered my call. When I explained my sudden request, Paul readily agreed.
Oh, that's no problem at all. Thank you for trusting me. Leave it to me.
Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate it. A few days later, I left work early again and went to a certain location. This time, I entered a small cafe diagonally across from the daycare, where I could sit and observe. From a seat by the window, I had a clear view of the daycare gate and the people heading toward it. After a while, Mike appeared again. According to the investigator's report, Mike has been picking up Sarah's baby from daycare on weekdays when she is at her part-time job. It is outrageous, considering he has never once picked up Ryan. Once again, Mike retrieved the baby and held her in his arms. The baby, dressed in a frilly, cute outfit, smiled as Mike beamed back at her. Then, I noticed Paul approaching. Paul, walking straight toward Mike, hadn't noticed him yet, and Mike was equally unaware of Paul's presence. Before they could cross paths, I hurried to pay my bill and left the cafe. Moments later, I heard Paul's surprised voice. It seemed the two had finally come face to face.
Mike, what on earth? Who's this child?
Dad?
You can't be serious.
Paul turned pale. Anyone would naturally assume the worst in such a situation. Mike, flustered, scrambled to make an excuse.
No, it's not what you think. She's a friend's baby. They asked me to pick her up.
Daddy,
At that moment, the baby in Mike's arms playfully slapped his face while smiling and talking to him. There was no way a child that young could understand the situation. It was immediately clear from her behavior that she always called him Daddy.
You're letting a friend's child call you daddy? What kind of friendship is this?
Well, maybe it's just a misunderstanding.
Don't lie to me. She calls you that all the time, doesn't she? And anyway, Emily told me you're supposed to be on a business trip. Yet here you are, picking up a baby nearby. This doesn't add up.
Paul's relentless questioning left Mike completely flustered. Mike often complained that Paul, who was responsible and dependable, was overly rigid and stubborn. But seeing this unfold, it was obvious that Mike's irresponsibility had pushed Paul to be stricter. In truth, Paul was always kind and understanding to Ryan and me. Mike didn't realize that his own behavior was the reason Paul had to be so strict with him. Completely oblivious, Mike ended up saying something utterly senseless to Paul.
Dad, you're a man. You should understand. There's this protective instinct to help a struggling single mother. This baby is my new girlfriend Sarah's child. Isn't she adorable? Her ex-husband left her while she was pregnant, which is just awful. So, I've been helping her out by picking up the baby whenever I can.
I could see Paul's jaw drop in disbelief.
What are you talking about? Girlfriend? Helping out? The ones you should be helping are Emily and Ryan. While Emily has been desperately raising your son, you've been playing daddy to someone else's child?
Emily's strong. She'll be fine. Sarah needs my help more.
You idiot. Ryan, the child Emily gave birth to, is your son.
Paul raised his voice, loud and firm. Mike took a step back in retreat. Fueled by anger, Paul closed the distance between them, confronting him directly.
I know how hard Emily has been working to raise Ryan, even from a distance. I've seen her taking him out for night walks because of his crying spells. During that time, did you ever help Emily at all?
Come on, isn't that what mothers are supposed to do?
And handling night cries is something fathers are supposed to do as well. Even I carried you out on walks when you were a baby. And now this. How are you going to explain this affair to Emily?
Paul's voice cracked with despair as he lamented the situation. Unable to let Paul handle it all on his own, I stepped out from the shadows. It's all right, Paul. I already know everything.
Emily,
Emily, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at work?
Feeling guilty, I apologized to Paul. I'm sorry. I lied about being late at work and asked you to pick up Ryan as an excuse. I wanted you to see what Mike's been doing with your own eyes. Ryan is fine. He's staying a little later in daycare today. It wasn't a coincidence that Paul and Mike ran into each other. I had planned everything carefully, calculating that Paul would pass by this daycare on his way to pick up Ryan. Given the locations of my apartment, Ryan's daycare, this daycare, and Paul's house, I knew he'd have to walk past here. To get to Ryan's daycare, Paul would have to pass in front of this daycare. Considering the direction Mike had walked yesterday, I calculated that there was a high chance Paul would run into him on his way to pick up Ryan, so I asked Paul to handle the pickup. It was a big gamble with no guarantee of success, but I pulled it off perfectly. Surely, even fate was telling me to leave a man like Mike. I stood tall, positioning myself beside Paul, and faced Mike head-on. I've spent the past month working with a private investigator to look into you and Sarah, and I found out that you've been living a double life for the past 6 months. Mike gasped in shock. I pressed on, not giving him a chance to recover. You've been finishing work on time and spending your evenings at Sarah's apartment. You've even stopped by during work hours. You've been visiting her frequently, haven't you?
You sneaky woman, spying on me like that. How disgusting.
Don't talk to me about sneaking around when you've been going to another woman's house. This betrayal is too much. I can't continue this marriage any longer. Let's get a divorce. When I said this, Mike furrowed his brow.
I've been thinking the same thing, but hearing it from you pisses me off. You know what? I've grown sick of your bossy attitude. Keep Ryan quiet. Do your own chores. Help out around the house. You're always nagging, and I've had enough. Sarah, on the other hand, is gentle and feminine. You could learn a thing or two from her.
Mike's complaints about me were so childish that I was almost too stunned to respond. He had no sense of responsibility as a father. If he refuses to do even the simplest tasks for himself or help with household chores, things that are goals for preschoolers, then he's behaving like someone even less capable than a preschooler. In fact, he was no different from the baby he was holding in his arms.
Those are perfectly reasonable expectations.
Paul said, clearly thinking the same thing, his voice tinged with exasperation.
I'm sorry, Emily. Let's arrange a proper time to discuss this further. We'll need Sarah to be part of the conversation too.
Paul, I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess.
No, the fault lies with me for raising someone like him. Don't worry. I'm on your side, Emily, and Ryan's too.
As always, Paul showed he was firmly on our side. I felt a sense of relief, but Mike's loud voice quickly pierced through it.
Finally, now I can live happily with Sarah and Hannah, just the three of us.
Hannah was likely the baby's name. Mike, deliberately rubbing his cheek against Hannah's, only made her cry and ended up panicking. Clearly clueless about how to care for a baby, he had made things worse. Later, as Paul suggested, we gathered at his house to discuss the divorce. I explained the situation to my parents and asked them to take care of Ryan for the day. I didn't want Ryan to be around such a messy and unpleasant adult conversation. At first, my parents wanted to join the discussion, but I gently declined. Being far away, they hadn't fully grasped the details of the situation, and having all the grandparents present would leave no one to watch Ryan. If Ryan saw all the adults acting this way, he might pick up on the tension and feel anxious. In the end, my parents trusted me and told me to call if anything happened. So, I went alone to Paul's house. In the room Paul led me to, Mike and Sarah were sitting side by side. It was my first time seeing Sarah. She was indeed beautiful, almost like a model. It was no surprise that Mike had been swept off his feet by her attention. Hannah was lying on the floor in the corner of the room, sound asleep. Her peaceful, innocent face was honestly adorable. Today was about finalizing the divorce. Since both Mike and I agreed on the divorce, filling out the paperwork went smoothly. But when we got to the topic of dividing assets, Sarah, who had been silent until then, suddenly said something outrageous.
Splitting the assets 50-50? Why does Emily get to take so much?
What do you mean? Why? I'm already being generous here. After all, I was the one who had been cheated on, and I had every right to demand more. However, she also has little Hannah, and the apartment she lives in is very rundown. Sarah has no family or support system. Through the investigation, I learned that her living situation was quite dire. As much as I didn't want to admit it, Sarah's circumstances evoked the protective instincts Mike kept talking about. I, on the other hand, had a full-time job, decent savings, and a steady income. My parents, upon learning about the situation, even offered to support me with early inheritance gifts. I knew I could raise Ryan on my own. That's why splitting the assets equally was an act of pity on my part. I came to realize just how unbelievably greedy Sarah was.
This is ridiculous. Isn't this the money Mike earned through his hard work? It's outrageous that you're taking half of it.
I've been working too. Savings accumulated during a marriage are considered marital assets.
But didn't you take maternity leave until recently? That means you were relying on Mike's income during that time. Clearly, Mike should be entitled to a larger share.
Perhaps influenced by her words, Mike started saying absurd things as well.
She's right. Splitting it evenly doesn't make sense. I think we deserve a bigger share.
What doesn't make sense? Even while on maternity leave, I had income. And that income exists because I worked for it.
But Mike's income is higher, isn't it? Half is too much.
Exactly. That's my money.
It's true that Mike's income was higher than mine. But for someone who cheated, his demands were outrageously bold. Whatever sympathy I had left for him and Sarah was quickly fading due to their sheer audacity. I had initially been willing to make concessions, considering we both had young children, but I realized that such generosity was misplaced. No, it's not too much, especially since I received no help with housework or childcare. In fact, I've just changed my mind. I'll be demanding the maximum alimony and compensation from each of you.
Are you serious?
You really are an insufferable, heartless wife.
Say whatever you want. I ignored the two of them as they continued their loud, childish outbursts and calmly proceeded with the discussion. Paul, acting as the mediator, worked hard to bring the conversation to a conclusion. In the end, the assets were split evenly and custody was granted to me. Both of them were required to pay compensation, and Mike was also ordered to pay child support. From my perspective, this was already a significant concession.
Well, this is the start of our new life together. Sarah, let's be happy.
Of course, Mike. Thank you for taking care of Hannah and me. I'm counting on you.
Watching the two of them shamelessly exchanging exaggerated affection, I gathered the necessary documents and addressed Sarah in a cold tone. Sarah, do you really think Mike will make you happy? He's already shown a pattern of not helping with parenting and hurting his wife and child.
What? Of course, he'll make me happy.
Really? I find it hard to believe people change so easily. Have you ever seen Mike care for Hannah beyond picking her up from daycare? At that, Sarah fell silent. She must have realized there was something that resonated with what I said. Mike was probably only pretending to be a good father during daycare pickups. I had witnessed a scene that supported this suspicion. After leaving the daycare, Mike put Hannah down and walked ahead of her without looking back. A 1-year-old, wobbling unsteadily, surrounded by traffic. It was dangerous, and I had to keep an eye on her to make sure she was safe.
That's not true, right, Mike? Tell me it's not true.
Of course not.
Sarah, unwilling to believe it, looked at Mike for confirmation, but his eyes darted nervously. Her expression quickly turned to one of concern. I addressed Mike, who was trying to cover things up. Mike, every time you lie, your eyes wander just like that.
No, it's not like that.
You were cold toward Ryan, too. You'd better make sure you don't repeat the same mistakes with your next wife and child. My final, forceful words left both Mike and Sarah visibly shaken. Their earlier displays of affection had vanished, and there was now a noticeable distance between them. With a heavy sigh, I looked at them both. They flinched and turned their gazes toward me. Well, I have all the necessary documents, so I'll be leaving. I don't ever want to see either of you again.
Yes.
Of course.
The two of them, intimidated by my resolve, answered meekly. I glanced at them, unable to respond further, and headed to the entrance to put on my shoes. During this, Paul, who had been present as a witness, apologized to me with a regretful expression.
I'm so sorry, Emily. I hate that you had to go through this until the very end.
Paul truly was a remarkable father-in-law to the very last moment. Wanting to ease his worries, I smiled and reassured him. Not at all. Honestly, I feel relieved to be divorced from Mike. I'm more worried about you, Paul.
Me?
Yes, actually. I leaned in and told Paul something quietly. He looked at me in surprise.
Emily, is that true?
Yes. That's why I think you should prepare to distance yourself sooner rather than later. Hearing this, Paul's expression became serious.
Understood. Mike's an adult now. He'll have to figure things out on his own. Thank you, Emily. You've been a far better wife to him than he deserved.
And you've been wonderful too, Paul. You'll always be an amazing grandfather to Ryan. It would mean a lot to both of us if we could stay in touch.
Thank you for saying that, Emily. Truly, thank you.
With that, I left Paul's house, knowing I would never return, and went to pick up Ryan. I canceled the lease on our old apartment and moved to a new one with Ryan. Fortunately, it wasn't far enough to require changing his daycare, which seemed to comfort him. Meanwhile, after the divorce, Mike married Sarah. He lived in Sarah's apartment for a while, but then he was suddenly fired from his job. It happened 3 months after the divorce drama. That happened faster than I expected. To be honest, I had anticipated Mike's termination. The investigation by the private investigator had already revealed how precarious his position at work was. It seemed that Mike's frequent visits to Sarah's house, even during work hours, had been discovered by his colleagues. On top of that, he had been misusing travel expenses for trips with Sarah, falsifying working hours, and repeatedly forging receipts. Due to Mike's egregious embezzlement, the company terminated his employment. Furthermore, the private investigator uncovered that the company planned to press charges against him. Grateful for the thorough investigation, I made sure to reward the investigator generously. I also advised Paul to move, warning him that Mike and Sarah might come running to him for help. Taking my advice, Paul acted quickly and relocated. Mike and Sarah, showing up at Paul's now empty house like fugitives, argued bitterly at the front door.
Why is Paul's house completely empty?
That's impossible. Dad, where did you go? Wait, I can't reach him by phone either.
Of course, they couldn't. Paul, utterly disgusted with Mike, had decided to cut ties and disappear from his life.
What are we supposed to do now? I quit my part-time job because I thought things would get easier after we got married, and now you've been fired? This is unbelievable.
You're the one who quit on your own. And besides, you're always demanding this, wanting that, saying you want to go here or eat there. Isn't it your constant selfishness that's draining all the money?
What? I only went after you because I thought you had money. Turns out you're just a complete disaster.
The two of them bickered viciously while Sarah held Hannah in her arms. Paul watched the scene quietly from the shadows, unnoticed. Later, Paul visited me again to give me an update. I had shared my new address with him, and he reached out to me there.
In the end, the two of them divorced, and Hannah was placed in foster care. It's sad that Sarah abandoned her, but honestly, it's probably for the best. Growing up with a mother like that wouldn't have been good for her future.
I agree. Hannah doesn't know anything and isn't responsible for any of it. Knowing that she had escaped her awful parents gave me a sense of relief.
Ryan is lucky. He has a kind and intelligent mother like you to raise him. Maybe if I had raised Mike better, he wouldn't have gone down the wrong path.
Paul, you're incredibly kind and wise. It's Mike who failed to learn and grow from your example.
Thank you.
Since then, Mike had been sued by his former company and was forced to pay a fine. Unable to find a new job quickly, he ended up doing day labor for income. Paul also told me that Sarah had started clinging to Mike after their divorce. She must have realized how hard life was on her own and tried to return to him. However, Mike, having grown tired of her, was desperately avoiding her. Eventually, Sarah, abandoned by Mike as well, tried to regain custody of Hannah from foster care. But due to her unstable life and inability to support herself, she failed to meet the requirements and was rejected. Paul explained that if Sarah wanted to live with Hannah again, she would need to make significant efforts to improve her situation and reform her behavior. Having lost both her partner and child, Sarah ended up alone once again. Still, I was genuinely relieved that Hannah was spared from being caught up in the ugliness of her parents' lives.
I'll keep an eye on Mike to make sure he doesn't fall behind on child support. You can rest easy, Emily.
Determined to fulfill his final duty as a parent, Paul stood tall and walked away with purpose. 3 years passed, and Ryan is now 6 years old. To celebrate his upcoming elementary school enrollment, my parents and Paul gathered to throw him an entrance party.
Congratulations on starting school, Ryan.
Wow, Ryan's already a first grader. Time flies.
My parents had come from far away to join us. Standing with Ryan and Paul, the day's guest of honor beamed with happiness, surrounded by grandparents who showered him with love.
Look how much I've grown. I'll work hard in school from now on.
Ryan had grown into a kind and cheerful child. My parents were excited about Ryan's future, especially since he loved learning so much. Paul, on the other hand, smiled hesitantly. As Mike's father, he likely felt unsure whether he belonged there. But Mike and Ryan were different. I wanted Paul to know that Ryan fully embraced the love of his grandfather, which is why I invited him today. Ryan turned to Paul and gave him a bright smile.
Grandpa, thank you for the dinosaur encyclopedia you gave me. You're always so kind. I love you, Grandpa.
Ryan, thank you. Grandpa loves you too.
My parents, not to be outdone, tried to chime in, but I gently stopped them with a sheepish grin. It was a heartwarming scene of family happiness.